How to use positive and normative statements in A-level economics by the Twilight Tutor. Positive statements are objectively based. This means that they can be tested using available evidence. And often, positive statements use words such as will, increase and decrease, improve or worsen. An important side note, positive statements can often be untrue. Please don't fall into the trap of believing that positive statements have to be true. Like we've already said, positive statements can be tested. And if we test something, we will often find they may be true or they may be false. Normative statements are opinion-based. They cannot be tested, and they are often wrapped up in personal value judgments by the person who is making the statement. Normative statements tend to use words such as should, ought, fair, or unfair. Is it positive or is it normative? Thinking about the following statement, try to work out whether this is a positive statement or a normative statement. It is wrong that the UK is prioritising monetary policy during the cost of living crisis in 2022. Hopefully you realise that that one is a normative statement. And it's a normative statement because it's someone's opinion. Somebody saying something is wrong, then you would easily be able to find another person who thinks that prioritising monetary policy is the correct course of action. So it's wrapped up again in somebody's value judgment. And a second, is it positive or normative? Loosening fiscal policy to reduce the cost of production for firms would increase economic growth by up to 1% in 2022. So that is clearly a positive statement. And it's positive because we can test. We could look at the evidence, the government could loosen the fiscal policy, and when that fiscal policy is loosened, economists could look and see, is economic growth increasing? And if economic growth is increasing, is it increasing by up to 1% in 2022? So quite clear test able to be done there. Dealing with statements in economics. It's important that we recognise, first of all, that we will often come across positive and normative statements in economics, but also what do we do when we actually come across these statements? Positive statements. The way that we should deal with positive statements is to discuss the evidence that could be used to prove or disprove the statement that's been made, and also discuss the merits of that statement. So if somebody in the extract is claiming that increasing interest rates would lead to more unemployment, how do we know that? How do we prove that? How do we disprove that? We deal with normative statements in a slightly different way. We must explain the reasons that lead to an individual making a value-based normative statement. For instance, any statement based upon who should and should not be taxed will look very different from a firm to a consumer's point of view, from a high income earner to a low income earner. And what we can also always do is rephrase those normative statements into a positive statement and then be able to discuss. For instance, a normative statement might begin, high income earners should be taxed more heavily in order to reduce inequalities in the UK. We can rephrase that into increasing taxes for the rich will lead to a decrease in inequalities. We can then test that by looking at the evidence. Are there any countries that have increased high band tax rates, and has that led to a reduction in the Gini coefficient, for instance? So two types of statement, but we deal with them in very different ways.